Well, hello, everyone. I want to start off by sharing, I think, what you already know. Uh, Feel free to engage in the chat, just bringing your attention to the bullet points here. And if you're still on X, feel free to tweet your comments. You've got the hashtags right there. I want to thank both SJSU iSchool for all their support for all these Library 2.0 conferences throughout the years. They've been doing this for a while now. And amazingly, you can still get the archive of all these events on the Library 2.0 community. And thanks also to our friends from SkillType. And again, feel free to engage in the chat, and we'll see if there's time for questions at the end. We'll try to take some of them. So I'm Stephen, and welcome to the session. You may have read something I've written before, or possibly been in a presentation that I've been in. I appreciate you being here today, and you'll be able to review the recording afterwards, and I'll also be loading my slides to the discussion post later on. Judging from the views of this session, it seemed like there was a lot of interest in this topic. So let's see how you're thinking and feeling about it about 25 minutes from now. If you'd like to get in touch with me after the session, very easy to reach me. And if you'd like to connect on LinkedIn, feel free to get in touch. Be glad to have a new acquaintance. And again, send any questions or comments if you don't get a chance to connect today. I'll look forward to that. Just wanted to share a few key takeaways for this session, some things I hope to communicate and get to today, and most of all, get you thinking about. I do want to share some thoughts on what it is that makes me think that librarianship is a design profession. I'll give some examples. With an idea like this, you really need to think about what does it really mean to move from a Master of Library Science to what we might call a Master of Library Design, if we're really going to take this to its logical conclusion. And it doesn't necessarily need to be a total transformation. There are many different options. For example, within library science, there could be different tracks. There could be a certification for library design. There could be core courses. But the goal, I think, overall is to somehow integrate design processes and mindset across the curriculum in our current library science education and also within our professional development. So it's not just about people that are coming into the profession as aspiring librarians, but also the people who are here now, no matter how long they have been in this profession, if this is an idea that they want to pursue. Now, of course, with any idea like the one I'm sharing, you know that there are going to be barriers to it happening, whether it's tomorrow, 5 years, or ideally 10 years from now. And I think that's been part of what I've been learning over the last 10 years, but I think there could be some progress made, and I think there are some good reasons for that. And I always like to try to finish my presentations with some next steps that you might be taking for yourself if you want to pursue this idea beyond this presentation. So you probably have had the same experience with me with your library education. Mine was quite some time ago, where now looking back, a lot of it is kind of fuzzy, but there are always a few things that were extremely memorable that you will always remember and will come back to you. And I want to share a story like that because when I was going to library science school, there really was not a lot of high technology. It was mostly a print world. And one day in my resources for science librarianship class, our instructor, Chris Subramaniam, said he wanted to show us the future of information retrieval. And so he said, come on, class, let's go over to the computer lab, although there were no personal computers at that time. And he said, I want you to have this experience. So we go over to the lab, and sitting on this desk next to this like giant keyboard printer thing is this thing right here. Most of you probably know what a rotary dial telephone is, even if you've not, maybe some of our newer generation colleagues haven't used this at any point. But if you want to write in the chat what the thing on the left is, feel free to go ahead. Because what we did is we took the receiver off the phone, dialed the number of a remote computer that was quite a far away from us. We heard the high-pitched noise that you are, if you know what modems, how they work, are familiar with. Then you put the receiver into that thing, which is, by the way, is an acoustic coupler. And you are all of a sudden, you're doing literature searching online. And so if all you've ever done before that is print, this is like a total revolutionary transformation in your thinking about what the future of information retrieval is. And at that time, we would be searching dialogue. So now, fast forward 45 years. And I'm doing some research. And so I just jump on my phone, right here, and I get on Perplexity AI, although I have Copilot app on my phone as well. And within 30 seconds, I'm pulling down citations on my topic with summaries. And, this is pretty amazing. So, I would probably in no way have been able to imagine 45 years ago when I first got exposed to this electronic online information retrieval, that I could be doing something like this 45 years in the future. I mean, I don't even think I could have pictured that 10 years ago or maybe 15 years ago, that you could do something like this on such a small device and have such a quick impact on your ability to find information. Now, knowing that, the big question that I have is, what are the skills that an LIS student needs now and future generations of students and future generations of librarians that are just coming into the profession that will enable them to be successful, knowing how rapidly our information technology is changing? And here's a quote from Sandra Hirsch in her introduction to the book that we were just talking about in the opening session. And it's hard to predict or even imagine how things are going to change in the next 10 years. And Sandra's reflecting there on that just between 2020 and 2023, we've seen amazing changes. And she says now triple that. Well, you could even go beyond that, beyond tripling it. If you look back at the experience many of us have had over the course of our careers and how amazingly things have changed, and oftentimes in unexpected and unpredictable and revolutionary ways. And the point of many of the chapters in this book, my takeaway is that, what this profession needs to be doing now is to put into place the conditions for future success, because the best future is the one that you're well prepared for and thinking about now before it gets here. And I find that's a kind of a running theme among many of the chapters in that book. And if you haven't taken a look at it, I would certainly commend you to do that. Now, to my way of thinking, so much of our day-to-day work does involve design. And if we're not totally there now, I think we are probably on our way there. So what I'm advocating in this talk is that we should recognize this, and we should embrace it now and over the next 10 years. And hopefully at some point we make some sort of official transformation in our education, in our accreditation process, in our professional development, and really embrace and move wholeheartedly into this new phase of what it would mean to practice librarianship as a design field. Now, if you were to go to any search engine, database, and search the phrase library design, I can almost guarantee you that what you are going to get is something like this. Because for so long, when we've talked about library design in our professional literature, in our conferences, in our professional development, this usually just refers to exteriors and interiors of building. And what I'm suggesting is that we need to think about library design more holistically, because that's really what's happening in our libraries. And I just want to give you a couple of examples, and then I'm going to share a poll, and I'll give you a QR code you can use if you want to join the poll. And I'm going to ask you for some other examples that you've experienced with design in your own professional experience. So let me just start us off with a couple of examples. So we do graphic design, and you think about the navigational signage in your library and how critical that is to wayfinding as to, supporting an excellent user experience for the people who are in your library. And just multiply this over and over again, the kinds of graphic design that we do all across our public-facing services. We do instructional design. And so here's an example of a tutorial, but it could be a lesson plan or anything else that's related to the educational practices that we do. Some of us have instructional designers on our staffs now, or we have positions that are combinations of library and instructional design expertise, so that we make sure that we have a professional, excellent design approach to our instruction. And what library doesn't spend lots of time on website design, because we're constantly working to improve the experience of virtually interacting with our service and resources. And we know how critical it is to have an outstanding virtual presence now as a library, in addition to the physical. So none of this takes away from the importance of library design of a building or an interior, but it's just that there is so much more to the design work we do beyond our building's exterior and interiors. Like, for example, I can just mention a whole host of other types of design areas that librarian workers perform, aimed at service delivery, general operations, and other specialized functions. Much of this with respect to what I call procedures, policies, and workflows. And some of that I often refer to when I'm talking about design and user experience as, is it broken design? So I repeat that, is it broken design? And what I mean by that is that if many of our libraries have things that don't work well, admittedly, or they're broken and they don't work at all. Now, if you're the one librarian out there that works in a library where everything works perfectly all the time, please get in touch with me, because I'd like to know exactly how you make that happen. So we need to apply design to understanding why things are broken in our libraries and what the possible solutions might be to fix those issues. And the way I like to think of it is, there's a gap between where we are and where we want to be, and what is the intervention that we design to move us from where we are to where we want to be. That's probably the essence of most instructional design and other types of design. So here's this poll, and I'm going to enlarge this QR code. If I can get my mouse over here. Oh. Hold on just a second. Hold on one second. Trying to get my mouse back here. All right, it seems I've lost my mouse, but you've got the QR code up there in the corner. And I think you can still get to it, even if it's not enlarged. Yep, it's still working. So that'll take you to a poll everywhere poll. And again, if you want to give, if it says register, that's okay. You can just hit skip for now. And okay, so LibGuides, yeah, we spend awesome amounts of time on LibGuides, web design. Exhibitions, that's a great example. Thanks for putting that one in there. Yeah, that's okay. Art curation, yeah, art galleries are very big in libraries. Yeah, programming, and that's all a whole time-consuming area where people are specializing. Yeah, social media, especially if you're creating cool videos now for TikTok, a lot of interesting design has to go into that. Displays, I think that's really important. So many of us have now, displays in our libraries, monitors, and you have to create really thoughtful, creative slides that will kind of capture people's attention at just, if they're walking by. So those are some great examples. I'm going to move ahead. You can kind of keep putting things in there if you like, or put them in the chat if you want to add them there. But owing to time constraints, I want to keep moving things along. Now, you may have seen this program that was an episode of Nightline in 1999, and it was an episode called The Shopping Cart Project. And this was actually a segment that profiled IDEO. You may be familiar with that design firm, IDEO. You can look it up on the internet if you're not. And I think this was the first time a lot of people got exposed to the design process. And it really did popularize what we call design thinking, and IDEO over the years became synonymous with design thinking. And if you watch that video, which is available on YouTube, and I always like to recommend that for people that might be new to design, especially my library science students. And it really does show you the steps that the designers go through and their thinking process. And it really does break down to these 6 bullet points in terms of what is the process they use to do what I was mentioning before. Identify the gap that you need to fill to have the creative solution. And all these types of library design work that I shared and you shared as well on that poll, they are examples of where design thinking can be used to identify a problem and then understand what the gap is and how you want to fill it with a creative solution. And design is the process that we use to find that solution. So to my way of thinking, there are many opportunities to introduce a process like this one across the LIS curriculum. Now, you will probably see many different ways in which this process is described. And sometimes it's 3 steps or 5 steps or 6 steps. It depends on what the school of thinking is on how this process should occur and how it is taught. And I would just say it really doesn't matter as long as it has, all these pieces of the process in there somewhere. And it is starting off with human-centered thinking and focus and putting the emphasis not on what librarians think is the right way to solve a problem, but what's the best way to solve the problem that's in the interest of the user and being human-centered. But that also works well within the constraints that we have to live with in our libraries, like budgets and resources and things of that nature. So there's lots and lots more information about this. And again, feel free to get in touch with me and I can point you to other resources. Now, even though this idea has been out there for a little bit, perhaps not widely accepted or known, I still like to think of what I'm sharing here as a wild idea, meaning an idea with some big potential, but not easily achieved, and quite possibly with ideas like this, and probably some you've had on your own, sometimes they're a little bit ahead of their time. Now, the root of this conference, again, based on the book Library 2035, well worth the read. And I browsed and I was looking through it for, wild ideas. And I will admit, I found a lot of great, interesting ideas. Some interesting predictions. One chapter has some pretty wild 2035 library job descriptions and that's going to be the closing keynote. So if you didn't get to read the chapter, definitely tune into that. But I think overall, wild ideas tend to be a bit limited in our profession. And I thought the Master of Library Design could be one of those wild ideas. And a running theme through all these chapters, and these are some quotes I pulled from the different chapters, appears to be one of creating the ideas, the philosophies, the conditions that will prepare this profession for an unpredictable, uncertain, volatile future of rapid change. Or as that last quote says, storms, threats, and crises that we need to be well prepared for. And if the answer, as this quote suggests, is to commit to innovation, well, let's innovate with some wild ideas. Where are these ideas going to come from? So I started this conversation back in 2014 with this column I wrote in Library Journal. And it was kind of a wild idea then, I guess, let's replace the Master of Library Science with a Master of Library Design, or at least throw out some alternative tracks and channels for people who wanted to do this as a possibility. And I continue to believe that if we did this, I think Joyce in her in the keynote said she's getting some really interesting people coming into the programs. But I think there are still lots and lots of people out there who don't really understand what library science is. And it may not sound like the kind of work that new generations will find of interest. I think if we were to change the perspective of this is a career about doing the design works that makes libraries work and helps people do all the tasks and things they need to do related to information, we might be able to bring in people, because we know that even if this profession is not always well understood or appreciated, we know our work is challenging, it's dynamic, it's rewarding. On some days, it's even fun. And admittedly, we know it's not always financially rewarding, and that is always going to be a challenge that we deal with. But I think if we propose a different kind of education and focus on design, that might bring in people who are interested in design professions. But we'll see, how sticking with our current brand and identity might change things or not change them in the next couple of years. Now, so how would this wild idea go from idea to implementation? And that is always the challenge of any wild idea. You can have lots of great ideas, many of them, but if you can't turn them into concrete solutions and things that we can actually take advantage of, your ideas are not worth very much. So while we could do much in our libraries right now to move in the direction of a design profession where we really need to see this change, if we want to have it as a goal for 2035, particularly in our library education, I don't have time today to get into all the specifics. And here's a little more information about what I was communicating in that article and how we need to have an education that prepares people for a radically different world of change. But if you want to get more information about how this could happen, I'm going to refer you to this article that I wrote with Rachel Ivy Clark based on some research we did. And this was published in a collection of essays on revisioning the MLS. And that's really what we did in this article. And I think this article still gives our profession a blueprint for how we do this. And we provide examples of design in the way it has already been integrated into librarianship. We have examples of libraries that have worked with design firms to improve their services. We identify LIS education programs that are already experimenting with design integration. And we explain how non-library design education programs can provide a template for a design-based library education and continuing professional development using more of the studio-based and critique techniques that are used in major design schools. And we even provide details on how this curriculum would look. And none of this is to suggest a complete elimination of the social science of librarianship. If you look at any design profession, there is still important theoretical and foundational parts of that education. An architect needs to know the history of buildings. A fashion designer needs to know about textile structures and characteristics. So none of this is to suggest throwing everything out that we've already been doing, but it's building on what we already can do with new thought, new thinking about design and how it integrates into our education. And implementing this wild idea doesn't have to be complex. We can move ahead with what I'm calling 3 guiding principles. Be focused on creating intentional practitioners. So, we're not just leaving it up to random chance how things turn out in our libraries. We're just like designers, we're being very intentional about our thinking. Second, be focused on the people who use our libraries through human-centered design, and also strive to engage the people who don't use our libraries through new and different approaches to encouraging design skills that people can see happening in our libraries. And third, I like to think of us as, or we should be change ready rather than change process type folks. the way that things are moving so rapidly, we have to recognize that change is not just static, one-time events, but it's an ongoing integral part of the work we do, because we're always in the mode to adapt to change, and sometimes we are even the ones who are driving the change. So I don't want to say that we should ever just be changing for change's sake, or that all change has to be revolutionary. This is a graphic from the Design Thinking Toolkit, and change can be incremental, just small tweaks for what we're already doing for the people we're already doing it for. But the nice middle ground is evolutionary change, where you might have a new program for your existing users, or an existing program that you better market to new users. And I will again readily admit that this is not an easy thing to do. And Rachel and I did a follow-up to our first article, in which we did a research, a qualitative study with the program directors at library science programs. And we asked them, is this an idea that's of interest to you? How would you see it being implemented? And while it was an idea of interest, you can see in this bulleted list, there are no small list of challenges. The main one we heard over and over again was ALA accreditation, because that can be a barrier to any kind of curricular change. So that's would certainly have to be something that we would overcome. But you see others, lack of resources, faculty without the specialization, concerns about investment in change that might not pay off. And especially we heard some of these smaller programs are just trying to get by, and they don't have the time, energy, or effort, or resources to create this kind of change. Doesn't mean we should not try, but there are some significant barriers. I'm going to skip my couple of next steps. So, because I know if you want to get to the next session, please go ahead. I'm just about to wrap up, and I have one more poll if you'd like to be a part of that. But I think there's plenty that you can do if this is an idea of interest to you, and you can certainly follow up with me. And the main one is, if this is kind of new to you, but you're interested, definitely look up the Design Thinking Toolkit on the internet. It's free, and it would expose you to some of the incredible ways that we can use design in our libraries in ways we may have never considered. I'll just finish up by saying, well, I'm throwing out a wild idea here, and you clearly know that I have not changed the way that things are happening in this profession of ours. It is not a heavily design-oriented profession, and there's no master of library design. But on a very small scale, I actually teach a course in design thinking at San Jose State University, and I really appreciate their forward thinking and wanting to integrate some design education into their curriculum. And over the 7 years I've been teaching this course, I've reached dozens and dozens of students, and hopefully we'll create a change by sending people out into the profession who understand, the impact of a design thinking process and creating design challenges. So I'm just going to do this final poll for the people that are still around. I'm hoping to see where you're at on this. Are you all in? Want to know more? Or yeah, you don't ever see this happening. Interesting maybe, but yeah, not happening. So yeah, I'm glad that some of you think this is a worthwhile proposition. So get in touch if you have more to say about it. And for some reason, my mouse seems to have kind of gone kaput, and I cannot get to the chat. Kelly, is there anything from the chat that you'd like to, questions or comments?
Yeah, so it was a very lively chat. Thank you, everyone. One of the practical things that came up is, what do we think, for the near future of this being like an additional certification?
I would love to see that. I think the library science program that does this will definitely, have an edge on the competition. I think that employers, when you think about what are the skill sets that library employers are looking for, I think this is the kind of, you know, we're hiring people already who have functional specialties in design, like instructional designers, graphic designers, and so on. So, yeah, I would be all for that. And I think if you look at some of the professional development, there are a number of opportunities just to take a, you know, 4-hour workshop in design thinking, graphic design, and all other types of design. So I think organizations, you know, like our consortia have been trying to share more of that. So look for opportunities, and if you're not sure where to look, get in touch with me, and I can probably point you to some of where you'd find it if you want to get more of this type of education.
Great. I think that's our time, but again, thanks everyone for a wonderful chat.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone, for joining, and enjoy the rest of the conference. And I hope this will get you thinking about, you know, what is the future of design in our profession.